levantaré mi bandera, estando en mi país o estando allá afuera, porque para mí, mira, no existen fronteras. Yo levantaré mi bandera, wow. Levantaré mi bandera, estando en mi país o estando allá afuera, porque para mí, mira, no existen fronteras. No, no, y es que hay mucho sentimiento, lo grito al viento, de ser latino nunca me arrepiento. Lo digo desde la Suiza centroamericana, reboté en Colombia y en Dominicana y yo.
Yo, ¿cómo están?
Hola.
Están bien. Did you listen to the song Latino y no me arrepiento? That's a pretty strong lyric. Y yo estoy seguro que la gente va a decir, wow, these Asians are speaking Spanish. Esa es por primera vez, right? ¿Sí o no?
Pasa seguido.
Okay. Lo más cómico es que todos nosotros tenemos diferentes acentos en español and in English, right? So people are going to be thrown off for sure, right? So let's start off. That's what I love, right? So when Pablo speaks English, then you're going to hear the Argentinian. Pero let's start off by introducing ourselves. Start off by the ladies. Comiencen ustedes, por favor.
I'll go first. So Asha Khai Chang, I am Caribbean Asian as well as Afro-Latina. I am a writer-director and based in LA, CEO of Love My Productions, and I am a 2-time Netflix fellow and Emmy-nominated producer. So I bring in the entertainment in this mix today.
That is awesome. Felicidades and welcome. Bienvenidos. Marcia, seguimos.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Marcia Chon Rosado. I'm originally from Guayaquil, Ecuador. And then when I was an older child, I moved to the Northeast. And I'm currently in the greater Boston area. And I'm currently so I help to build tech and startup ecosystem. So helping and specifically focus on diverse founders. So think of Latine, Latinos, Latina founders, and entrepreneurs, Black founders, diverse founders, women, and helping them to scale and grow. So I'm currently director at Cinematica Labs. I also work at the National Science Foundation and really here to help build an economy for all. And I think, I hope to bring the investor and entrepreneurial lenses conversation. Y estoy feliz de estar aquí. Like Armando said, we can speak Spanish, we hold different intersections, and we're here.
No, it's awesome, and so let's go into welcome. Gracias. I mean, obviously, Pablo tiene en Ecuador, tiene el ceviche, and she's in Boston, so they got the chowder. You know what I'm saying? So, bro. Pero Pablo, dímelo.
Bueno, so my name is Pablo. I was born in Argentina. I've been living in the US for the last 20 years. I have a background in finance, data analysis, but I also run a catering service, and I sell my own chimichurri. So what I do for catering, it's Argentinian asado. So a lot of people are kind of surprised when they find out what I do. It's like, wait, what? You cook Argentinian food, but you don't look Argentinian. So that's always super interesting. So yeah, I mean, I met Armando through some food events here in LA, and he's been a great resource. He's very well connected, and he's always a pleasure to deal with. So when he asked me to be a part of this panel, I just couldn't say no.
Well, thanks, bro, and then shout out to number one, our sponsors, Latinos in Uniform. And we'll touch on that later. It's cool that they're sponsors, but it's even better their mission, right? Nothing says better patriotism than Latinos in Uniform. Y la gente piensa que los hispanos solamente piden y no regresan, no dan, And so shout out to Latinos in Uniform. Shout out to Todo Wafi and Rafael, because this panel, and Jovi, this panel started last year, right? And in that time, I got to follow Asha. I got to see Pablo. I got to see Marcia. Like we don't even know each other, but that's the beautiful part about stories. Is that you get stories, it's harder to lie, right? Yeah. With time, it's tiresome lying. And so when Rafael said, hey, can you put together Asian Latinidad? It wasn't just representation, but it was also progression. If you are in, like Pablo's downplaying himself. He was on MasterChef Latino. You know, he is in tech. He lives in Southern California. He has his own business. Asha, you are, a director. Media is so important in changing the narrative. ¿Tú me entiendes? And then Marsha's in tech. Marsha is in tech. And so those are real big topics that move this society. When I say food, it's not just consumption and food porn. It's, CPG, right? The pandemic has changed the way we consume food. Social media, like it or not, changed the way we consume information. So when there is media projects and then there's, tech, and what Marsha does, that's why I will never say social media is bad. You'll never see me, I'll take a break, because it's what you consume. But I'll stop talking now. Pero digamos Marsha, then Asha, then Pablo, go a little deeper on how the Chinese, Ecuador mixed. And then Asha, tell me how the Afro-Caribbean, Asian mixed. Y después Pablo, how did that start? Let's not, fast forward our lives. Marsha, you first.
Yeah, so for me, the Chinese Ecuadorian mix, and I'm multiracial. So on my dad's side, and specifically on my dad's side, on like his dad, my grandfather, that's where the Chong comes from.
Yeah.
And it was my great grandfather who migrated from southern China to Ecuador. And, we are talking about food here. I saw a couple years ago, I have a tia who still lives at my grandparents' old home in Guayaquil. And she showed me my great grandfather's passport, which was so powerful. And I saw on it, it said like merchant and business owner. And even though I never got to meet him, now that I'm in the past recent years, I've really wanted to reconnect with my roots. And I feel just really connected, particularly to my grandfather. And so that's where it comes from. My great grandfather was Chinese, and he actually ended up creating, a chifa in Guayaquil, and he employed, a lot of our family members and others in the community. And then my grandfather worked in that chifa. And then there was a migration that moved from China to Ecuador. And similarly, say that again, Armando?
What years did they have the migration of China?
I mean, my grandfather, I want to say it was like, I didn't even pull up the picture, but it was like late 1800s, early 1900s. Yeah. They were moving there and to Ecuador and to Peru and in nearby Andean region. And but it's interesting because a lot of the Chongs in Guayaquil, like they know each other. Yeah. And then I had like my aunt ended up marrying my uncle who moved from China. And so there was continued migration, and he has achieved to this day. So there's continued migration, not just in the early 1900s, but even, in decades after that too.
No, I like that. And I asked that, and you kind of, paused the way I paused. I just asked my mom and dad a year ago how los chinos llegaron a Nicaragua. Because yo me crié nicaragüense, nací en Nicaragua, soy hispano, soy latino con sangre china. And my mom goes to me, who looks straight Chinese, me dice, ¿y por qué estás preguntando eso? Because it's not till we come to this country that people ask you to identify who you are, as if being a good human no suficiente. But we'll get into that. But Marsha, I love your story, and I'm going to ask you something later on recently reconnecting. Asha, talk to us about how your mezcla comenzó.
Sí. So on my mom's side, actually, it's actually my great grandmother. I grew up with my great grandmother. I call her my tita, and so that's like the Cuban, but also like there's also Hakka Chinese. It's like actually in our bloodline on my mom's side. But the main mix we always say is just Cuba and Jamaica. Like that's it on that side. And then for my dad, he's Jamaican and Chinese. So there's always been a Chinese migration over to Jamaica for a while. So that's where that comes from. And actually my last name is hyphenated. So it's Hai Chang. So it's Jewish and Chinese. Like my family side to mix it all the way up. And I just came out nice and chocolatey.
a high standard to live up to, an Asian and Jewish last name, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but so just like you guys, I had to get into finance.
There
They're
you
like,
go.
"You do law, finance," and that's what I studied at first before even getting into the arts. That was hard, convincing my family, immigrants to be like, "Okay, I know I'm born here in the States. I want to do art." They're like, "No."
Yeah, because it's about education
But
and all those things, Oh, no. Well, welcome. I like it. And I'm going to ask you something back in a little bit. Pablito, ¿cómo comenzaron los argentinos y tu mezcla?
Well, I mean, are we doing this in Spanish or are we doing this in English?
Whatever.
Like,
Spanglish,
Yes.
great flavor.
okay, so after the Korean War from 1950 to 1953, Korea was decimated, because of the war, and like a lot of Koreans wanted to get out of Korea and in search of a better life. And like one of the things is that Argentina had during World War II, Argentina became one of the richest countries in the world because they didn't align themselves with any of the two sides, and all they were doing they were just exporting grain. So while everybody was involved in the war armament race, Argentina was just selling them food, right? So I mean, Argentina experienced a massive GDP growth throughout World War II, and then people from Korea were just like, okay, like this country is a lot easier to get a visa rather than the US. Mm-hmm. And it's also a big country, so like they tried over there, and then that's how a lot of people went from Korea to Argentina. And then my dad actually went there when he was like 6 years old.
And what year is
that? That was my dad's, let's see, so that would be 63, 64. So my dad essentially grew up there, and then and then there were up to like 35,000 Koreans in Argentina. My understanding is that it is the largest concentration of Koreans outside of Korea in a Spanish-speaking country. So
I know that back then, or does that still exist now?
I mean, because of the ups and downs of the Argentinian economy, I know that a lot of people have left, like me, and now it's probably around 20,000 from what I hear. So I mean, it's
nice. No, that's good. And so for you guys who haven't met me, I'm Chinese Nicaraguan. Los dos abuelos chino y nicaragüense, and they had left around the 20s, 30s, avoiding world war. So the China that maybe a lot of your grandparents come from was evading world war, and it was basically Hong Kong, the Canton side de China, So I'm very proud that when you meet the OG Asians, even though they don't look at me como soy de ellos aceptan que yo soy apellido Tam de Cantón, Hong Kong, porque ahora todo es mandarín. So you see some OGs. But yeah, my parents were born in Nicaragua. I was born in Nicaragua. I just became a citizen, 6-7 years ago. And I was just telling a story. I've been to the White House many times as an immigrant and citizen. So I love telling those stories where before, I think, before social media, it was hard. It wasn't like necessary to tell a story, because I'm sure you guys would agree that whenever you post Pablo or Asha or Marsha, do you feel that you're helping others kind of not go through the same challenges or maybe resistance we dealt with growing up?
I guess so. Yeah.
Yes. Or to help others relate or feel like there's someone I can relate to you. Mm-hmm. Or and even some of the themes that we were talking about, like uncovering our stories and where we come from, like our roots, like that's a common journey, And so, yeah.
I asked that because, for example, Pablo competed on MasterChef. Fue un chef. He wasn't an Asian Latino chef. Asha, you're a talented director, film producer. Then you have to explain what you are. Marsha, you're an tech, and you have to explain what you are. And the reason I say that is, let's face it, when we first got to America, we didn't look like the kids in our school. So let's talk a little bit about that. So, for example, I was in ESL, And I'm like, bro, why am I ESL? Do you hablo dos idiomas? But that's the way the system was. You want to talk about bullyism today? Back then it was worse.
Oh,
And
yeah,
so
they're brutal.
even simple names like Sean, I would be like, who is Sean? SEAN, like, why is there no H? Right? So in the beginning, I do look back and I did realize I was different from the American kids. Pablo, Asha, and Marsha, did you have to deal with that, growing up when we look different? Speak up. We're in the living room.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
it's what was going through. The short answer is yes, and what was also, I'm an ESL kid as well, Armando, so I relate to that. I was gonna say both. What was going through my mind is like both in the U.S. definitely because and all from the perspective of like and I think our panel and other panels are, and now we're in a space where we're talking more about the intersections within Latinidad, but I at times people are like, you're from Ecuador, like you don't look like you're from Ecuador, or and depending where I am in the world, like for example, when I went to Asia, they were like, oh yeah, you look like maybe sometimes Filipino or Vietnamese, like they made me feel at home. Versus even in Ecuador, my nickname, I don't know if this is common in your cultures too, but in Ecuador, everybody has a nickname. My dad's nickname was Chino. My nickname was Chinita. Like, so depending where I am, I always felt like the way I was perceived evolves, including in the US.
%. Asha?
Yeah, mine is different. Mine was more like they would see my name first and then they meet me and they're like, I'm sorry, you're who? Great. And then it's usually that. And they had to explain the name. And I'm like, okay, so. And that's what I went through in school. And I would have friends, right? I had other Chinese friends, especially because I went to Chinese school. And I would have Chinese friends. And like you said, it was like warm, receptive. Like, oh, that's you? Cool. And there's like, it's cool. You find your community. But when it would be just like you said, and it's worse a little bit, I guess, for me, I feel like, because it's like, technically I'm born in America, right? So I should feel like I'm accepted in the country I'm born in. And instead, I've always felt like I was created of everything that I was like, that people were taught to hate, which is kind of.
People don't realize is that
it's heavy.
They think America's black and white. It's not. Back to when the Constitution to labor, people don't think that, people forget that this country was built upon labor, and who did labor was immigrants. And so when they say go back, that's like the most ignorant shit you could say, So
exactly.
Right, but we'll get into that later. Pablito, growing up, ¿te sentías diferente vos?
I mean, I still feel different. I think being in American soil. I mean, when I was born in Argentina and I look Asian, it's I think it allows a certain otherness that not a lot of other people are able to experience. And not only that, I think that I don't have one culture to compare the American culture to. I have two other cultures to compare to. So I have noticed that in myself, I'm like sometimes saying, oh, this is a very American way of thinking. This is a very Korean way of thinking, and this is a very Argentinian way of thinking. So like, it's like so hard, like especially during the World Cup. Are you kidding? Like the US, Argentina, and Korea are all playing. Like, oh my God, no! What?
No, I'm with you on that. And it's important because we don't have to disclose our age, but obviously we're of a certain age. And people think that Chino Latino is algo nuevo. The LA Times, wrote a story, a national piece about the future of this country of minorities is going to be Asian Latinidad, because hay épocas, right? So first it was the Afro Latinos, and now it's Asian. And I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. I'm glad, and we'll get into if you guys really, really feel Asian, right? So we're like honored que yo orgulloso que soy chino, pero como yo no hablo, nunca me crié en la China. We'll touch on that, but when they talked about it's the future of this country, I realized why. Because America's own demographic, and this is good for you, for Asha, because it gives us all talking points. The fastest and youngest growing demographics are the Latino community and the Asian community. So
Yeah.
it's not because, it is a trend or a niche. It's because this country, we know Latinos are the fastest and youngest growing. Right behind us is the Asians, right? So any other population isn't growing as fast or within our age range. And so I'm like, okay, now America has to accept this. It's not me
Mhm.
pitching, hey, yo soy
Mm.
Chino Nicaragüense or Chino Latino, depending. And that kind of annoys me, right? So let's talk a little bit about, I just want to make sure, shout out to the LA Times, because in some ways they paved for this, for Rafael and Jovi and Jessica, by the way, to reach out and saying, hey, this is, and they didn't know anyone. So I'm like, okay, if we put this panel together, I don't want to just put together representation, because I
Mhm.
want to talk about careers. I want to talk about success. Para que ellos vean,
Yeah,
somos más
yeah.
americanos que queramos. Like Pablo said, somos los tres. So Marsha, can you really feel 100% China?
Well, that question is something that I actually have been wrestling with more recently. And it was and I mentioned earlier, how I was at technically my abuelito's house, and really asking questions about what my grandparents were doing, because I never got to meet both of them. And I realized, like, I had always been wrestling with, like, am I allowed to even claim the label of being an Asian Latina? And then I was like, I am allowed to reclaim that, and that can look like in different ways. And I felt even guilty, yes, because I can't speak Chinese, and I would have loved to have learned that from my grandparents and great grandparents, but I didn't have that opportunity. But there are some aspects in terms of stories in my family of food and of other things that I don't want to lose, and that I want to, like, reclaim, and it is a part of me. And so it has been tough, because at times I felt, and especially when I was younger, I felt like, am I allowed to even use that label? And now it's more of like a come to terms with, yeah, yes, and that there's so many diverse stories that fit within that. So
100%. And when I
and
mentioned how I felt, you kind of said, "Oh yeah, I know," because and it's not that we wrestle; it's out of respect, right? No de que lo da
Yeah.
pena or vergüenza. It's because respect. Asha, how about you? Claiming
Um,
the Asian side.
yeah, but to be honest, I feel like it was easier for me growing up to claim actually my Asian side than it was to claim the Latinidad.
Yeah.
Which is because, see, so that's which is funny, because it was easier for people to digest Blasian, or it was like, that was like, I was like, oh, people can digest this, and I can't run away from my name, is how I looked at it. Like, I can't, it's there. But when people were like, why do you eat this at home? Why do you want to go to Cuba? Why do you want? And I was like, oh yeah, I need to really show you my Latinidad now. And even in that, taking pride in the Black Latinidad, and be like, it's here, we're here it is.
Yeah.
So I feel like that actually, believe it or not, came later in life, actually, for me, which is, or better, hidden. It was at home, and then I was able to bring it out to light into my work now. Yeah.
No, I love that. Pablito. Pablo's like, he's like really Korean, right? So he makes me feel like I have to express at times,
Well, I mean, I'm about to blow your mind then. I've been actually thinking about my whole identity thing as of lately too, and I come to realize though I have visited Korea a few times in the past, but because my upbringing was, I was born and brought up in Argentina, so like I feel like I identify a lot more with Argentina than with Korea,
Yeah.
which is strange because like most of the people I deal with on a daily basis look like me. So I have a lot of exposure of Korean culture, and when I speak to someone that is Argentinian, a lot of times I don't even reveal that I am from Argentina, and I just I just let them talk, and I just observe, and they have no idea that I'm Argentinian.
Wow.
So it's, both my parents are Korean, so I am ethnically Korean.
Bueno, I think you're right. I can't question that, nor would I. But I think at the end of the day, people have to realize is that como uno se cría, more than likely, esa es la cultura de alguien. It's in America. It says, where were you born? They don't say in Nicaragua. You know, they don't say in Ecuador. They don't say it in Cuba. They certainly don't say in Argentina. And I think it's when America, where were you born? And that's what you are. And I think that's why I sometimes tend to fight more. Like, who are classify as where we're from? Como los criamos. You know,
exactly.
And so I think not saying Coreano, you know, Cuban, Chinese, you know, in Ecuador, it's like we can't erase our grandparents. And so come on, man, I'm an executive at NAREP, you know, which is the largest business trade association. And maybe 1% of the time someone will say, but also Chino, no soy hispano. I'm like, bro, doesn't get more Latino than me. Yo vine como inmigrante, soy ciudadano. I'm speaking Spanish 50% because in my other businesses I'm in food tech, you know. And so how often, how much is Spanish of the culture is part of your day, Marsha, and then Asha y de Pablo?
Well, what part of the culture are you talking about? Wait, I missed that.
Hablando español, how much like?
Hablando español. Yeah, well, right now a lot of my work has been hablando straight up español, no tanto ahorita, but a couple of years ago it really was, because I was working with entrepreneurs across Latin America and helping to expand a past company that I was with from supporting entrepreneurs, not just in Mexico, but in Argentina and Colombia, and in Peru. And then, but now I'm largely focused on entrepreneurs in the US, which does include Latinos and Latinas, which is more Spanglish in nature. But in terms of besides language, in terms of like talking about our culture, that is like every day. Every day in my job, I feel like I'm advocating for.
I asked that because I think sometimes, you know, people don't really embrace culture being an asset. You know, like Pablo said, habla los diferentes idiomas, that's an asset, right? So Asha, has that helped you in your industry? Obviously, it's like a killing opportunity for you guys, exposing Latinidad and double guys. But this is an Asian Latina channel, but it's bigger. We're double cultured. Y eso la historia de este país.
Triple culture.
Well, you're lucky on, you know. Pero hey, Asha, has that benefited? Have you really embraced the opportunity of your culture in your industry?
Yeah, sí, mi español y mi arte. So like that's where most of that comes in, or like in my like everyday living, in my food, my friends, like it's funny because I that's when I was really trying to find my roots and I moved to LA. The first thing I did was like, I need to start writing in Spanish again. I need to get back into that and start telling stories that I never got to hear growing up, or with characters that look like me. You know, Asha, the Disney princess, right? Which is funny. Her name is Asha as well. And I remember always telling people, like, your name's Asha. I was like, sí, es como, you know, en presencia de Disney. So like, same thing, same name. But I just really like, so I would say that it's kind of funny how I was writing already. I was already writing and putting it in my art, and then now everyone is interested in knowing more about Latinidad. Like now they care to know. And so I would say, yeah, I'm in the right positioning. That has happened. Like my latest film, Marquedos, it was beautiful. I was Spanish, English, and ASL in like one film.
I think you should, and we all should take that as an advantage, right? Because if no one ever knew who we were, why not let us be blessed and honored to be the one to write the narrative, you know, other than somebody else, right? So Pablo, what percentage of your day are you speaking Spanish or Spanglish, como dice Marsha, or communicating, como dice Asha?
I mean, I definitely work with Spanish speakers all the time. I'd say, you know, a good like 15% of my day is in Spanish.
Yeah.
So I mean, clearly, no, my language has change over time because like I have to be able to communicate what I'm saying to the people that are next to me. So I mean, and so I have to adapt to Spanglish just because, like en Argentina decimos estacionar, pero acá, pero acá es parquear. Entonces como que si yo digo estacionar nadie me entiende, entonces digo, o, che, llámame más tarde, pero acá la gente dice llámame para atrás. Entonces como que o sea, tengo inevitablemente que cambiar mi lenguaje para que la gente me entienda, porque al fin y al cabo es comunicación, ¿no? Pero
Told
sí,
you.
o sea,
Told you, if you close your eyes and you listen to Pablo speak, you're like, I'm speaking, you're listening to an old Argentinian guy who owns this little asado spot asking si quieres chimichurri. That tripped me when I first met Pablo, because he was next to me at the LA Food Festival. So no, I think it's interesting that people realize that we should really embrace it, because there are Latinos by surname in this country, X amount of generation, que no hablan el español como nosotros.
Same.
Eso es más difícil, because today it's an asset. You can communicate with more people. People need to start embracing what others consider weaknesses. Y es el idioma, y es la cultura. And, it just happens that we have a cool culture on the Latin side. Now, let me ask you this. Recently, something came up. I have to do another interview. And it was basically an Asian person saying that I didn't grow up with cariño. I didn't grow up with love the way everyone thinks is cariño and love. In the Asian culture, it's about education and basically showing love in that way, in a form of success, And so they wrote to me. It was a film, film festival, and they said, "How do you feel?" And it sounds cold-blooded, but I do remember my Asian side. They weren't cariñosos durante Nochebuena. They weren't cariñosos during Thanksgiving or Sunday masses, but I knew they loved us, but there was no sign of affection on my mother's side, which, by the way, I'm going to make you guys think I'm a sellout. So I thought the whole time Chai and Seipo were my aunts' names. It was basically the number in order they were born. You know what I mean? So Seipo, Chaipo, and I'm like, I feel like the biggest whitewash ever. But anyways, can you elaborate on that, Marsha? If you and Asha and Pablo, de la cultura china, ustedes notaban que no había el mismo calor y cariño. No es que era menos, pero no es el mismo. Can you guys touch on that if you feel?
Yeah, I mean, so I feel like I have a little bit different of a story. So I did hear that like my great grandfather was like more reserved when it came to affection, but I feel my dad is super affectionate, and I think it's only because his parents they literally both passed away on the same day when he was young, and so I think that when he was like 20, and I think that impacted the way he parented us. So my dad's been like, my parents have been super affectionate, but I did hear that about that with the older generations. But I think that life experience may have shaped them in a different way.
Okay, understood. Asha?
Yeah, I was brought up to be a perfectionist, and that is still something I deal with to this day, is because that's what that was actually expected of me all around. And it was another kind of pressure. It was like, not enough Latinas are getting their master's degrees. Not enough of us are being college educated. Go, 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 go. So, and it was like, go for Ivy. And then I'm hearing it on both sides of my family. So that's how I grew up. With love, right? But it was just like, my mom's like, I love you, but make me proud, So I actually had to push all the way. And it was also that idea of like the power of the name, right? Like kind of upholding that. So I would say, yes, there was some love. My mom is actually very, very affectionate, but she's also tough.
Yeah. No.
It's just the thing. Yeah. And also I have the extra pressure, right? Because it's immigrant parents. So I have all of my ancestors going, you're now in the States, no excuses, get it done.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I want to touch on that too, as far as no excuses. But Pablo, did you feel the same on the Asian side?
Well, I mean, my mom has always been very affectionate, but yeah, I could definitely see the whole thing with my dad. My dad is a man that, to this day, is not very good at expressing his feelings for his children. He'll tell us, you guys know that I love you guys, right? And that'll be about it. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, but he won't say it directly to us. It's like, you know it, right? Okay, we're good then. So yeah, I think like in that regard, I got a very stereotypical Asian father, but like I can't say that my mom was like that at all. So, and I think that has translated into me being a lot more affectionate with my wife and even with my dog.
Aw.
So,
Yeah, no.
yeah.
And it's important because again, it's a story, and I have to comment on it. But I'm not one to say it's one way or the other, But I wanted to get you guys' takes because we have different cycles and generations of our Asian Latinidad here, right? I think I'm probably second generation detached. Marsha might be third or fourth. Asha, you're probably within that middle range. And Pablo, you're like the most connected, de la tres. And I love that because I live vicariously, and we all live vicariously through each other. You get what I'm saying? And these panels, depending on what level you are, you can double down and get closer to the level you want to be at. I'm not saying that one is more Asian Latina than the other. Trust me, I've had over the last 2 years had to. I mean, there's a three-part episode, series called Barrio Chino, which is our way. We grew up saying salsa china. Barrio Chino, like it's soy sauce, and I'm like, how?
Yes.
Yes.
That's because that's how los nicaragüenses decían que es salsa china. I'm on Barrio Chino. I'm like, oh, you mean Chinatown, And so I had to really do that because whether we like it or not, we have the unsolicited responsibility to represent a double culture, which happens to be Asian Latinidad. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so my next, obviously my next question is, so one of the things I do is I'm an executive at NARP, which is the largest Latino association dedicated to housing and entrepreneurship.
Ooh.
But we're unique because every culture is represented in there. It's the only organization that has the massive numbers that we have con todas las culturas de Latinidad. So that's why when Marsha talks, de Ecuador, then Pablo and I can know about ceviche, right? Hablamos de Cuba, before the revolution, el triunfo de la revolución, as they say in Cuba, the population of China, the Chinese out of China was in Cuba,
Right.
And of course, who doesn't like the Korean food and in the short ribs? So to me at NARP, I deal with 20 different cultures. Marsha, do you deal with that in your industry? Asha, do you? And Pablo, do you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
right before, as the pandemic was starting, myself and a couple of other people, we co-founded something that was called VC Familia in the venture capital industry. And we were trying to connect Latinos, and we were really bringing the conversation within the venture capital space around, just like you said, Armando, hey, it's not just a black or white conversation. Latinos are diverse. Like we had like the first panels specifically in the venture capital space around some of the first conversations around Afro-Latinidad. What does that mean in our industry? Asian Latinidad. What does that mean in our industry? Being multiracial, being indigenous. What does that mean in our industry? And bringing those aspects of our culture to the space. And that's like, I've stepped aside from that, but it's grown. Like there's over 200 plus, Latino investors in that. It's really grown into a community.
Oh.
And I'm really glad because at the end of the day, we are the now and like the future of our economy. And we are shaping it, not just in terms of representation, but how we're investing our dollars, where our dollars are going, the businesses we're building. And so it's in our everyday, Armando. But that was one specific example of how, like, in the industry I'm in, how we brought ourselves to the conversation.
No, 100%. And I'm going to be with Laura and the Lat VC team, next week. So it's a small world to connect. And obviously, Asha, I got to connect you with our friends at Avenida in LA, So in your industry, and piggybacking on Marsha, Asha, it actually, do you agree that it also gives you different, a wider scope to write and products on, correct? Because now you can touch on American society issues, rom-coms, and now, as what Marsha did in the VC world was like, all right, before we even start talking, I'm sure you guys let me answer your questions, right? Are you looking forward to embracing just a wider scope?
Ooh, yeah. To be honest, I'm actually happy you mentioned Avenida. I actually know Fanny and Nelson. That's where we filmed the last film. Yeah, so actually we filmed the last film there as Marquelos was there. And that's exactly what we're talking about, is that we do need more of our rom-coms. We do need to see more like more diverse Latin characters still. Like, we don't have them. And I remember actually kind of breaking the mold a lot with even how I casted for my last film, because, you know, the studios weren't expecting to see the people that I was selecting. And ironically, they didn't know what Latinidad looked like. So we had a wide range, everything from like darker to more Asian. So like we had everybody there. And then we even had deaf representation, right? So like I brought in the conversation around deaf and disabled and people with disabilities as well, because that wasn't something they wanted to talk about, was how, just like you said, how diverse, you were saying that, Marcia, like how diverse we really are. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And I'm grateful to be in the position that I'm writing and producing those stories now.
Yeah.
But it's, to be honest, Hollywood still has so much to catch up on that.
But I think nowadays you can create your own content. It doesn't have to go to a big studio or what nowadays, with just the power of the iPhone, you know? And I think it's a great wide open field, because you're almost a subject matter expert, just like Marcia is in her VC world. You are. Pablo, have you thought about the really, really big opportunity you have by La Doble Cultura in the food world? Is that something you're still looking forward to dominating?
Absolutely. So before I answer that question, I want to say I would love to see on screen a character that looks like me. Meaning, I want to see an Asian that speaks Spanish.
Yeah.
I want to see that sometime. Like, I would love to see that.
Hey, Asha, make it happen. You better call Nelson.
I'm definitely doing
a badass panel, you know, and you're gonna make us get on a Zoom with the studio. Good work on that, Pablo.
No, I really will. I like this. Yeah. Sorry.
So okay. So going back to your question, like, I mean, I sell chimichurri online. No, it's a small business that started about 8 years ago, and is it making a killing? No, not really right now. But I just keep it on because like people will just over time be like, hey, like I tried your stuff, it was really good, and so like I think that a business is just like a person that it needs time in order to grow, and I don't think like me only because I push it with people is gonna necessarily grow. So I know what I have, I know who I am, and I know where I'm going. So I am in no rush. And as long as I take my time, I think that I have to do what I'm comfortable with, and sometimes I do things that I'm not comfortable with, and I just push myself, right? But yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, my goal is to be as famous as Sriracha around the U.S. and then take over the world. So high funk please should be careful.
You got something there because chimichurri take the base so it lasts longer. Okay, so we're gonna finish off with two questions, right? Number one, it's a real quick one. The other one is how to stay in touch with us, but just answer the first one first, right? So de la doble cultura, Asian and Latin. Let's start with Pablo this time. What are your two favorite dishes to combine, to have at the table? Not combine, but have it. I hate the word fusion, guys. But let's just say la combinación. Algo chino, algo Latino. What would it be, Pablo?
Oh, well, for the Argentinian side, I'll definitely go with un buen asado. Okay. Right, for the Argentinian side, and then inevitably, like roasted meats can get greasy sometimes, so like kimchi has to be there.
Well, I like that.
It's a palate cleanser, like boom.
Look, that sounds banging just because that's who you are. That's who we are. That's a little jab at the non-cultured calling people fusion. I hate that shit. All right, Asha. Algo chino, algo latino. Dime.
Oh, this is so hard. Okay.
No, it's not.
I keep thinking about plátanos. I can't help it. I keep thinking plátanos. I want them so bad right now. I think I'm craving them.
Plátanos and what comida china?
I'm trying to think. I don't know. I'm thinking with like some chili oil. What would I want? Can I actually make that? Can I put plátanos inside of a dumpling? Can we do this? Could this be a thing?
There you go. Pablo's right.
I'm thinking foods I want to eat. I'm hungry.
No, I like so maduro. She said maduros and dumplings, which is great. I love tostones and dumplings. You get the hard texture, y el dumpling. Who doesn't like dumpling, right? Marsha,
Ooh.
Chino.
Well, okay, my two dishes are gonna make you really full. One is my uncle's sopa de wonton. And then that's the Chino side. And then on the Ecuadorian side, it's tough. I was gonna say yapingachos, which is an indigenous dish, and it's like it's these like potato patties with like sausage and egg, and that's why I'm like, you get really full.
No, I like that. No, I think for me it would be un churrasco, and then of course a good sopa de wonton. Like there's nothing wrong. Una sopa de wonton is like bomb. Un churrasco. I love churrasco. You know. So that was the first one. The last part is for our viewers. The last question, we'll start with Marsha, is how people can stay in touch with you. But what are you working on now to give exposure to what you're doing, so that people can follow your journey? So number one, they know where to follow you. But what are you working on now? What journey?
Sure. Well, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok. I'm Marcia X Chong. And I'm working on several projects. I'm continuing to support and uplift specifically Black and Latino, Latinx entrepreneurs in the U.S. and potentially in other regions too. And there's some initiatives I want to bring out. One is Pharrell Williams' Black Ambition, which I hope to lead and build the mentorship program around. There's going to be a cycle next year for it. Every year we support around 250 founders. So that's one initiative. And in addition to that, there's other organizations that I am an investor of. One is the Boston Impact Fund, and they invest in closing the racial wealth gap. And so if you're in the founder in the Northeast, like definitely reach out to them and yeah, stay connected with me at Marcia X Chong.
Thank you. Asha, your answer is pretty simple. You're going to produce this panel into a reality documentary, but go ahead.
Exactly. And then
that's a shameless plug. How can the viewers follow you, and what journey are you working on?
Yeah, so support, gosh, I guess, okay. So you can follow me on Instagram, also on Facebook. So it's at Asha Khai Chang. Follow my production company, Love My Productions. We're on YouTube, Instagram, and also lovemyproductions.com. And support Marque Dos. So Marque Dos Film at Instagram. That's one way to kind of follow the journey for that film. I have some features coming along, and clearly some more Asian Latinidad content to come too. So let's do it.
we got the cast and the funding right here. Right on, Marsha. Pablito, tell us what you got.
Okay, so I mean, I'm constantly working on getting people exposed to Argentinian culture and in Korean culture. Well, Korean culture, I don't really need to, because it's been like exploding by itself. Yeah. So for my part, I'm really trying to expand like the reach of Argentinian food within the American culture, and the people that are around me, and anyone in Southern California. I'm also trying to work on expanding my business for chimichurri. If anybody wants to follow me, I'm on Instagram, Chef Pablo Kim, or you just Google me. I'm like the first link, and yeah, like I just want to keep growing into everything that I'm doing.
All right, on, man. Welcome. And obviously, for those watching, my name is Armando. You can follow me on Comidazo, and shout out. In the next 60 days, we're going to have the launch of the 3 episodes of Barrio Chino. And so there'll be where we do a viewing party. There's my partners, Caesar and Jessica. We basically chose a Vietnamese Puerto Rican, a Cuban Chinese, and an Ecuadorian Chinese, all in business. And so, Asha, you got to get a viewing. We're going to do one in LA. Pablo, you got to come. Marsha, we're going to do one in the East Coast. So, follow us on Comidazo, but Barrio Chino is going to be coming out. So I want to thank you guys. Wasn't this panel awesome?
It was.
Yes.
We got to thank you.
We got to talk about housing too. I want to talk to you about that. I work in real estate, but yeah, let's keep going.
100%. Let's follow each other on social. This just DM me. But also thank you to the family at Wafi, Rafael Todo Wafi, and also our sponsors, Latinos in Uniform, because one thing we have to touch on is that, you know, the representation of Latinos in the service is sometimes undervalued, and we are just as patriotic as anybody in this country. Nadie lo puede decir nosotros que somos menor que ellos. So, you know, so shout out to Latinos in Uniform. Thank you all for this panel. Thank you to the WAFI, and be on the lookout. Follow us all on social media, guys.
Desde Nicaragua hasta Costa Rica, con esta canción todo el mundo se identifica. Llamen a los chilenos y a los cubanos, llamen a Puerto Rico y a los mexicanos, que ya se armó la rumba. Desde Panamá hasta Ecuador, vámonos a Perú y luego hasta Salvador. Que se escuche en Brasil y Argentina.
Yo quiero un grito de mi gente latina y levantaré mi bandera, estando en mi país o estando allá afuera, porque para mí, mira, no existen fronteras. Yo levantaré mi bandera.